This is the story of a people who wandered without a homeland for 2,000 years. A people scattered across continents, persecuted, yet never abandoning their dream of return. In the ashes of the Holocaust and the chaos of collapsing empires, that dream would finally be realized. But the birth of one nation meant the displacement of another, and from its very beginning, Israel's existence would be bound to both triumph and tragedy. How did the impossible become reality? This is the story of the creation of Israel. The idea of a Jewish homeland did not begin in 1948. In the late 19th century, facing waves of anti-Semitism in Europe and inspired by nationalist movements, Jewish intellectuals began to call for a return to Zion, Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. Theodor Herzl, founder of modern Zionism, argued that Jews would never be safe without a state of their own. His writings and the First Zionist Congress in 1897 ignited a movement that encouraged Jewish migration to Ottoman Palestine. Small communities formed, building farms and schools, laying the seeds of what was to come. During World War I, the Middle East was reshaped. The 1917 Balfour Declaration expressed Britain's support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, while also promising to respect the rights of the Arab inhabitants. After the war, Britain took control of Palestine under a League of Nations mandate. Jewish immigration increased, fueled by persecution in Europe. But as Jewish communities grew, so did tensions with the Arab population, who feared dispossession. Riots and violence erupted in the 1920s and 1930s, leaving deep scars and mutual distrust. The Holocaust changed everything. 6 million Jews were murdered by Nazi Germany, and survivors found themselves in displaced persons camps across Europe, homeless and traumatized. For them, the idea of returning to Zion was no longer just a dream. It was survival. Jewish underground organizations intensified migration to Palestine, often illegally, while international sympathy for the Jewish cause grew. The world could no longer ignore the demand for a Jewish state. After World War II, pressure mounted on Britain to resolve the Palestine question. Exhausted and unable to control the violence between Jews and Arabs, Britain handed the issue to the newly formed United Nations. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan. Palestine would be divided into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem placed under international administration. The Jewish leadership reluctantly accepted the plan, seeing it as a step towards statehood. The Arab leadership, however, rejected it outright, refusing to cede land to a Jewish state. The vote in the UN General Assembly on November 29, 1947, marked a turning point. For Jews, it was a moment of jubilation. For Arabs, one of outrage. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the independence of the State of Israel. Within hours, 5 Arab armies, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded. For Jews, this was the War of Independence. For Palestinians, it was the Nakba, the catastrophe. Fighting raged across the land. Against all odds, the newly formed Israel not only survived, but expanded its territory beyond the UN partition lines. By the war's end in 1949, armistice agreements had been signed, and Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine. The war created one of the most enduring conflicts of modern times. Around 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes, becoming refugees in neighboring countries or displaced within Palestine itself. Entire villages were emptied, their residents never allowed to return. For Israelis, this was the miracle of statehood against overwhelming odds. For Palestinians, it was the beginning of exile and dispossession. Two narratives were born, each deeply felt, each irreconcilable. The early years of Israel were marked by both triumph and struggle. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish immigrants arrived, Holocaust survivors from Europe, Jews expelled from Arab countries, and others seeking refuge. The population doubled within a few years. Housing, food, and resources were scarce, Yet the young state mobilized every effort to absorb the newcomers. Institutions were built, a democratic parliament established, and Hebrew was revived as the common language. Israel had been born in fire and blood, but quickly set about building a functioning society. Israel's birth did not bring peace. From its first day, it lived under siege, surrounded by hostile neighbors. The 1950s saw frequent border clashes and raids, as Palestinian Fedayeen fighters launched attacks and Israel retaliated. In 1956, during the Suez Crisis, Israel joined Britain and France in a military campaign against Egypt after President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, but withdrew under U.S. and UN pressure. The war showed both Israel's military strength and its dependence on international diplomacy. A decade later came the Six-Day War of 1967. In the weeks before the conflict, tensions rose as Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran and mobilized forces in Sinai. Israel launched a preemptive strike, destroying the Egyptian, Syrian, and Jordanian air forces in hours. In just 6 days, Israel seized the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. For Israelis, it was an astonishing victory, securing Jerusalem as their capital. For Palestinians and Arabs, it was a devastating defeat, leaving millions under Israeli occupation and fueling bitterness for generations. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack. At first, Israeli forces were caught off guard, suffering heavy losses. But after desperate fighting and massive U.S. support, Israel pushed back and even crossed into Arab territory. The Yom Kippur War ended with a fragile ceasefire, leaving deep scars on all sides. For Israel, it was a sobering reminder that survival was never guaranteed. For the Arab world, it restored some pride, proving that Israel could be challenged. These wars defined the map and the psyche of the Middle East. Israel emerged stronger militarily, but its occupation of Palestinian and Arab lands deepened the conflict. Refugee camps swelled, resistance movements like the PLO gained strength, and the dream of peace seemed ever more distant. The creation of Israel had given Jews a homeland, but it had also locked the region into a cycle of war and mistrust. By the 1980s, Israel had survived 3 major wars and countless clashes, but peace remained elusive. In 1979, Israel signed a historic peace treaty with Egypt, returning the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for recognition, the first time an Arab state accepted Israel's existence. Yet conflict with Palestinians deepened. In 1987, the First Intifada erupted, a grassroots uprising against Israeli rule in the West Bank and Gaza. Images of stone-throwing youths confronting soldiers spread worldwide, reshaping global opinion. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s promised hope. Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization recognized each other, and limited Palestinian self-rule began. But assassinations, terror attacks, and mutual mistrust stalled progress, leaving peace unfinished. The 2000s brought both new opportunities and new violence. The Second Intifada erupted in 2000, far bloodier than the first, leaving thousands dead. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, but conflict with Hamas soon followed. Meanwhile, Israel's economy boomed, technology flourished, and its military grew ever more sophisticated. The nation stood as both a success story of resilience and a flashpoint of unresolved conflict. The creation of Israel is one of the defining events of the modern era. For Jews, it fulfilled an ancient dream of return, offering safety after centuries of exile and persecution. For Palestinians, it marked dispossession and exile, a catastrophe whose effects endure to this day. The conflict born in 1948 remains unresolved, shaping the politics of the Middle East and beyond. The story of Israel's creation is not just about borders and battles. It is about identity, memory, and the struggle for recognition. It shows how history can bring both justice and injustice, hope and despair. For some, it is a story of survival and triumph. For others, one of loss and longing. To this day, the echoes of 1948 remind us that the birth of nations is never simple, and that the past continues to live within the present.